3 San Antonio police officers have been charged with murder and suspended without pay after killing a woman armed with a hammer inside her own apartment.
Well, we need to start with the victim who is at the center of this case. Melissa Perez, 46 years old. She is a mother, and she was having a mental health crisis very early on Friday morning, just after midnight.
The trial has now begun for 3 now former San Antonio police officers who shot and killed a woman.
That incident happened in June of 2023. Today, prosecutors and defense attorneys gave their opening arguments in this case. We know that former officers Nathaniel Villalobos, Alfred Flores, and Eliezer Alejandro are on trial for the death of Melissa Perez.
I've been reading a lot of comments and I've been paying attention to the trial. I just want to acknowledge there's a lot of really strong emotions out here about this. A lot of strong emotions. You know, feeling this way or that way. Should she have been shot? Should the officers, not have acted that way? A lot of people are mistaking policy for law. There were violations of policy. Does that mean that they shouldn't have utilized deadly force under Chapter 9 of the Penal Code? Those are all different issues.
So you need to pay attention because it used to be just survival on the streets. Now it's survival on the department.
Blu Wolf Podcast.
This episode of the Blu Wolf Podcast was recorded before the conclusion of the trial discussed. Any commentary is made without knowledge of the final verdict. Thank you for watching.
Hey, welcome to the Blu Wolf Podcast. I'm Willie Cantu. I'm with David Sapansky, my partner in crime. We wanted to come on as quick as possible because along with editing and things like that, it takes a little bit of time to hit this situation of what's going on, especially as you can see in our background here, this trial that's happened in San Antonio, Texas, with these 3 officers that were charged with murder for shooting what they know now as a woman with mental health issues. We'll talk about why this is very significant, and what's led up to, and what's led up to the investigation and what's going on with the trial now, because initially you already had an idea of what was going on, but now this trial, it is like, if you really like true crime or anything like that, you should be watching this trial because you'll love it. And it's in the background here. I'm limited in talking about what I can say because I am working for all 3 law firms that are representing the individual 3 officers. And I am an expert on it, and I've been working on it as far as, advising for now. And depending on how things go, they'll put me on the stand for that. So I can be limited in what information that I'm given. But David, he'll be able to take on and some questions. And the other thing is it's already out. Like, you can go back and you can watch the trial. If you haven't seen it, you can go back and watch it from the beginning if you have time. Some days are longer than others. And then you can skip through the commercials with YouTube, which is a pain in the ass when I'm watching it, because at the wrong time they're about to say something I really want to hear, and here comes a friggin' commercial from YouTube.
This episode of the Blu Wolf Podcast is brought to you by Blue Line Professional Inspections. Blue Line is a first responder-owned business.
And I have to, especially if I have it on my phone, I have to resume it, I have to open it, I have to go back, and I miss some stuff on it.
There's a positive to that. They have sponsors. Like, there's a hint of
Yeah. And them sponsors, I don't even pay attention to health sponsor, but it is a pain in the ass. But the biggest thing is if you're not paying attention to what's going on in law enforcement today, and what's been going on, I'd say within the last 8 years, I'd say 8, would it be 8, 10, maybe more?
Somewhere, right after 2015, 2017.
Yeah.
Probably closer to 8 or 10.
And especially people that are in law enforcement themselves already, if you don't know what the hell's going on, you're going to get bit in your rear on something that you do and what you think is good faith, and then the actually implementation of your duties. So you need to pay attention, because it used to be just survival on the streets. Now it's survival on the department.
Yeah. It's almost a bigger concern.
Right.
Almost, really.
It's to me, it's a little bit more dangerous. I'd rather take my chances on the street against some crook than what the department's going to do to me legally, in a sense, or what they think is legal and all. But it is truly a travesty of what's going on. And as you and I keep going on, we talk about other cases. We've talked about Andre Vargas, touched on Oscar Cruz. We talked with Thomas Villarreal on this last one here. And now that we've built up to this one, we can truly say it's a pattern of what's happening. Initially at the beginning, you can't really, surprising. And then you go along, and then it goes along, and it keeps on happening. Yes. And I'm still kind of deciding what I want to say specifically about our police department. Something may trigger me here. I don't know. I may get emotional and say, fuck it, I'm going to say it, but.
Well, this is a part one. Obviously, we're going to have to do one after the trial concludes.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
With the not guilty verdict. And I think that's the time when you can maybe do that.
100%. But the issue is we've seen this war on police. We know that. It's look at the feds trying to, the ICE agents trying to just do their jobs. They are getting attacked. They are getting rammed. There are coordinated attacks on them. There are people shooting at them, throwing rocks. They're not just trying to hinder them. They're actually trying to hurt or kill them, And so these are the feds that we have with this going on. But San Antonio, and I've mentioned this in the last podcast, and probably some other ones, we always lag behind in these trends. And here we are. San Antonio is going to try to do the same shit that we've already seen in the nation that doesn't work because it's caught up to us.
Yeah, but I don't want to put the cart before the horse, man. But I think they're trying to maybe jump 2 or 3 steps ahead because uniformed officers involved in their duties get involved in a non-duty shooting and they're charged with murder within 15 hours of the shooting. But we're not talking about Portland or Seattle or San Francisco or Los Angeles. We're talking about Texas, San Antonio, Texas. To my knowledge, I haven't seen any of that in those very liberal cities out there that I'm aware of, and I haven't seen any of it in Texas. And so this is a bold move that can change the culture of the police department and the dynamics with the police and the citizens here. It absolutely
Well, at some point, it was going to happen. And why? Because we're in a blue city. We're in a blue county. And, I've talked to people about this, and it always has to turn to politics. And some people, I don't know their politics. Yeah. And I've gotten to the point, well, I don't give a shit at this point, because now I can argue my point. It's just what it is. This one particularly. And the attorneys know it, and you can see what they're alluding to, that there was a political, pressure to it. And I'm waiting for them to draw out somebody. I really am. But I mean, is it surprising? Sure. But it shouldn't be because of our politics in our city. We just voted in an anti-police mayor. Majority of the city council are anti-police. They may say that they're not, or maybe not even said whether they're supporting the police.
Well, 2 of them said that they're not.
Well, right.
Yeah.
But I'd say the other ones, if they're leftists, they don't like the police. If they're Democrat socialists, they sure in the hell don't like the police. So why would they do anything for us? And that's the biggest, most obvious situation of what they don't like about us is that they didn't fund the number of officers that we asked for here recently, right? They went from 65 to 40?
Yeah,
45?
Next year's budget, they're asking for some really,
which is still low, puts us behind and all that. And they're more worried about, the homeless people, this Project Marvel that's going on, the Spurs, than public safety. And the other part of it, and talking about our department, our chief has said that crime is down, which I don't think it is. And a lot of the other people that I speak to, the citizens of San Antonio, you look on Nextdoor, crime is not down.
Well, it's definitely not down when it comes to violence against police officers. There's been 20 officers, right? Was it 20 in 3 years?
Yes.
That have been shot. And, so I have a graph, Nip will get that for you, and it shows how far we are ahead of other cities in the United States in terms of police-related shootings. And I'm not talking about us having to be involved in an officer-involved shooting with a citizen. I'm talking about our people getting shot. And so, it's an alarming thing. It doesn't matter what they say. At the end of the day, it's what's actually happened that matters rather than what people are saying. And it's just time for people to start tune in a little bit and say, yeah, crime's not down. And violence against police is way up. No
doubt. But they're not, I know our department doesn't really want to show that. because it is alarming. It will become alarming to the citizens, but they would rather wait for something big and for it to slowly be revealed. And hopefully they're not even in office anymore. You know what I mean? A lot of it's passed the buck down the way and like, hey, it wasn't me, I was doing this or whatever. And then they push it on themselves there. But speaking of the officers, in this case in particular, it's not a secret that what we're seeing is this happened in June of 2023. These officers responded to a call for service. It was not a mental health wellness check or anything like that. It was a crime in progress, basically. And the fire department was dispatched at the same time. Late at night, it was just before midnight. And from what I'm hearing, from the officers, it was very busy that night. So fire arrives first. Fire makes contact with the suspect, who is this Melissa Bettis. And I can say now without skipping ahead, she obviously exhibited signs of mental health issues. She was diagnosed as schizophrenic. Of course, she didn't say that right away, but you can see it that night. She was dressed like a little gang member. She was in blue jeans. She had a white muscle t-shirt, a white beater in a sense. She had shaved her head, and she had a bandana on. So she had that little character
which is usual in part for the courts. Nothing like the pictures they've been showing her. Right?
No. And it came out in the trial that they showed, what she really looked like that night. And I was waiting for that. I'm kind of glad they did. I mean, and here's the other thing. I don't know this woman. I feel bad that she had mental problems and of her illness and her family, no doubt. But, a lot of times we deal with these types of people, and it's the police that arrive first. We don't have social workers yet. We're about, no doubt, at some point they're going to try to send them first, But fire department makes contact with her. They shut off the alarm. All the people in this building, her building, were outside because this fire alarm's going off. And if you listen to the first caller, she is concerned, and not to mention that, like, this woman, you can tell in her tone that they've dealt with her before, and she is, in layman's terms, a pain in their ass, is what it seems. And because then she was talking smack, what she said, and oh my God, she got into another apartment that night that was vacant. So she was running around doing whatever. And one thing people need to understand, they don't have like normal working people's sleep hours. These people are up all night. Right? They don't have a job, so they're up all night. They can do whatever. And so fire department shuts off the alarm. They see the damage. She cut the wires to the fire alarm. And for one, we suspect that she got into the room by prying it open, which is a burglary, mind you, because there's pry marks on this room. So we don't know for sure because no one witnessed her do that.
No, but she had she cut the wires, and she had
the tools
in her home, right? So
yeah, that, and she had the tools that they saw. Not to mention she had some of the pieces of wires on her shoelaces, and she had one on a speaker that was tied around her wrist. So there, she's wearing the evidence.
It might be a clue.
It might be a clue, yeah. And so fire, knowing that they called the police. Police took 45 minutes to get there, mind you.
It sat in the queue an hour. So there was a lot of time between the time the police were originally called and between the first officer arriving on the scene. I mean, that has nothing to do with the eventual outcome, but you can tell that it took a little bit, which means the officers were busy.
Yeah.
And there may or may not have been some frustration about having to cross some district lines. But
yeah, so the fireman, knowing, because she admitted to him that she cut the wires, he was cognizant of not trying to upset her, so he secretly took a videotape of her admitting that she cut the wire. So he had that evidence in all. So when the officer arrives, the first officer makes contact with her. She's speaking to the fireman, and you can see on the video, and I've said this before, because she's talking to him, she's kind of laughing, she's looking at him this way, and the officer arrives from this way, and you can tell that she noticed him and what she knew what might happen, because she gave him that once over, like, oh, okay.
Yeah, the demeanor changed.
Yeah, the demeanor changed in her, and so he starts questioning her.
Can I just say something real quick?
Yeah.
Just because I think it's really important to bring this up, because I've been reading a lot of comments and I've been paying attention to the trial, I just want to acknowledge there's a lot of really strong emotions out here about this. A lot of strong emotions. Feeling this way or that way. Should she have been shot? Should the officers, not have acted that way? A lot of people are mistaking policy for law. There were violations of policy. Does that mean that they shouldn't have utilized deadly force under Chapter 9 of the Penal Code? Those are all different issues. And I know that the lawyers are bringing that up, but people need to understand policy and legality are not the same things. One is an administrative function and one will send you fast to prison for life. And I just need to point that out. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but we do recognize there are very strong emotions out there by people. And, you're going to have to work through that. You have a right to have your opinions, and we're just trying to give you a better perspective of what's actually happening.
Yeah. And don't let me forget that, because there's something more to talk about with that. But so she sees the officer starts questioning her. And actually, when the officer got there, they showed him the damage in the where the wires were. So he saw the damage, and then he goes out there and talking, and she actually admitted to him that she did that. Of course, she was talking about the FBI listening in on her, so that's, again, you can see the signs and how she was falsely arrested a couple of times. And I probably won't say, I don't want to say what I want to say up to this point, because I had a lot of opinion about that. But so he tells her, the cover officer shows up, and he tells her, walk with me to my car to run her, check her on the computer.
Which he never did. He did not run.
He didn't get to it. Yeah.
He was at the car for 8 minutes. I mean, those are important details, right?
Yeah. He didn't get to it because she takes off running. She ran from them, which is an evading arrest. That's what it is. That's a crime to do. And I'll say this, the DA in his opening statement didn't say she evaded arrest. He said, oh, she decided to go back to her apartment.
He also said the wrong apartment. So, I mean, it's not like you didn't have time to prepare for this
very
important, critical trial.
But that was intentionally not said, that she evaded arrest at that point. She got, well, I can't talk about that either. I'm trying to be real careful. But nonetheless, so she evades arrest, gets into her apartment, locks the door. And now, at this point, you have a barricaded suspect, is what it is. Officers are trying to get in. They believe they have fresh pursuit. And here's the other thing, and this is important, is that the first officer that arrived, so this happened, and the South Side has 61, 62, and 63 sections. The first officer that arrived that got this call was a 61 officer. So he was crossed over. You can tell if you watch the video, he was not happy about that. So he was pouting to me. You can tell he was trying to do as little as possible because it's not his call. This is common. And I hate to say that, but it's common that we've seen you work patrol, I work patrol, and they're just not happy. God knows what happened. I don't know if they thought they were going to get off early, or they were hungry. They wanted to go eat, knowing that this call is going to take a while. And so that's the responding officer. And then when she gets into the apartment, they're thinking, okay, well, let's just calls over, they think. But the actually handling officer, whose district it was, who ended up being a handling officer, the district officer whose call this was in, him being a good district guy and a rookie at that, he was 4 years on at the time, he comes over, hey, I'm going to handle my square, I'll take the call. But when he comes over, he speaks to the maintenance man. Maintenance man sees the damage. Now they have a value to the damage, and now it's a felony amount of damage is what it is. So things and I've seen this happen. I know you've seen it. Just when you think things are done, something else happens, and it draws you back into it's just life. That just happens. Sometimes it happens in a good way, and then sometimes it happens like in this situation.
Changes the level of importance and the level of response.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that is it. But, going back to the first officer, yeah, it was very clear he didn't want to be there.
No.
I know that Ben Cifuentes had him kind of define what a blowing up a call means. And I know you can't talk about this, but they're also making, repeatedly saying that, man, if that would have been handled correctly from the get-go, then none of this stuff would have happened. But this stuff did happen.
Yeah.
And so that's the way we have to kind of approach it. Again, it's important to understand, that what your actions are out there have consequences, and you have to be able to articulate why you did them. And when we get to the part about the trial, and I'm assuming we're going to get there, It's very hard for me to understand why the people that have taken the stand thus far have not prepared adequately to be able to sit up there professionally and respond to questions you should be expecting to defend 3 men that are on trial for their lives. And it doesn't come across like they are either ready, seasoned, or experienced, or took the time to research prosecution guides, procedures, manuals. I mean, that goes all the way down the line.
And so, not even then, at the time they were investigating it.
Yeah, not at the time they were investigating, but no, you almost want to say, what did you think was going to happen?
Yeah.
You were just going to walk in there, sashay in there and say, well, you know what, I did this and that's enough. It's not enough. As a professional police officer, you need to be able to go in there, set a professional stage, and be able to articulate what your investigative actions were and why they were there. And they need to be complete before you take action.
Yeah, so nonetheless, she gets in there, things happen. As the officers are trying to go arrest her, they can't get through the door. They try kicking the front door. Those doors are metal doors, and they have 2 deadbolts, and then of course whatever locks on the knob. But they couldn't get into there just by trying to kick it. So they go around she lived on the bottom floor. They go around to the balcony. She has a little patio, and it's smaller than what it looks like on the video, to tell you the truth. And she has her windows open. I don't know if her AC went out, but she has all of her windows open. She's got flypaper, laying there. And so they're talking to her from the window, and she's running back and forth. She's like adamant, nope, I'm not coming out. They're trying to get her to come out. Nope, not coming out. Then they discover she has an elderly bedridden man in one of the bedrooms. And she tells them, she had said it before. Some guy she met took him off the streets. And this guy, bedridden, there was what looked like a bottle of urine or a cup of urine next to him. So he couldn't even get up and go to the bathroom. So he's in there, which they talked to. He was awake and all that, which kind of throws even more so to me of the urgency and the exigency to get her out of there.
Again, changes everything.
Everything. That's why I'm saying these things happen all of a sudden, like, oh, boom, and it keeps them there. Well, one of the officers tears the screen off to try to unlock the door. She had a bunch of these religious candles in her apartment.
Those are big and heavy. Right? We got to talk about that.
Yes.
Big and heavy.
She throws one at the officer. It's glass. She hits him in the arm, and he pulls his gun out on her because he's caught on the balcony.
Right.
And when he does that, he tells the dispatcher, I have one at gunpoint, which initiates what we call an E-tone, which is an emergency tone. And here comes the cavalry. He slows them down because he doesn't want these guys running code and getting into an accident potentially, which we've seen before,
Too many times.
Yeah, and then so they get there, but here comes the cavalry. So now more officers are there, and now there's a lot of people, and they're talking, and then one talks to a supervisor, and the supervisor says, yeah, go get her, which is what we believe that they had the right to do at the time. But to kind of expedite what we're getting to, the officers again they formulate whatever plan they could at the time. They try to get in. Now she's got a roofing hammer in her hand, and she swings at the officers. And initially she swung at one who was really close. She came with, like, they're talking about 5-6 inches away from his head through the window, which was, of course, was already open now. And so they backed off. And then when they try to initiate their plan, she comes back at them. One of the officers shoots at her and misses her. The other problem was that there was a TV right in front of the window that was between her, anytime that they were dealing with her, between her and the patio.
Right.
So they shoot at her, miss her. I mean, this woman, I'll have to give it to her, she was pretty bold, because she runs back and then she comes back with a hammer, and then she charged at them. The officers felt like their lives were in imminent danger of serious bodily injury.
Is that behavior of a rational person?
No.
I mean, not just engaging, nowadays maybe more.
Especially if you got shot at 5 times.
Uniform officers, but now you've been shot at, and now you want to attack them again?
Right.
I mean, that's not rational, right? Reasonable, rational, those kind of things.
Right. So they shoot her, they hit her twice, and guys get in. These guys went right to work on her. They tried to save her life. Started applying pressure. I'm not a medic, so the...
Most of them have some basic
yeah.
pressure to try to stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
Sustain life.
those plastic things to cover the hole on their. I don't know how, because I was never trained in that stuff, but you can clearly see these guys trying to save her life, and all. So this is what happened. So that situation, again, we can talk about it. The department, the chief goes out there. Of course, the media gets out there, and this is already made to look bad, because once they learn that she has mental health issues, which has been this deal and this, and I don't believe, and I haven't really done the stat research on it, but we do a lot of knee jerking on these anomalies, like George Floyd. They want to change all the policing because of one friggin' meth head, and fentanyl head is what we can call him, specifically, not fix what happened there, but let's just change all of policing. And so because there are people with mental health that are getting shot at different times, a lot of suspects have mental health issues. And so then it becomes a big deal with them. The chief says they violated policy and protocol. One of the assistant chief was trying to say that they should have just left. They left her there. They call it disengaging, tactical retreating, tactical disengagement. It's like a tactic. Really, it's just leaving. That's what it is. There's nothing. You're gone. And to leave a woman like that in her state of mind and what she's already exhibited as her type of behavior and just walk away from it, these citizens are the ones that call. So what good are you going to do those people if this chick is still running around?
Who else made a statement right after this happened?
I'm thinking of one.
Yeah. So it was the San Antonio Police Officers Association president. And we're not going to spend a lot of time.
That's the one I was thinking about.
We've kind of talked about that a little bit, but here it is. And Nick will put that up for you. On behalf of the San Antonio Police Officers Association, we expressed our deepest condolences to Melissa Perez's family, obviously. Following the tragic incident, Chief McManus followed all necessary protocols. All 3 officers have been suspended indefinitely at this time. This is an active investigation and I cannot speak to this matter further until the investigation is complete and the judicial process is underway. Well, it's underway now. It's literally ongoing, day 16.
And he was wrong.
Yeah, no, he was wrong for that. But what I'm saying is, and again, I don't want to turn this whole thing into a Danny Diaz, what's happening to the association, but there was recently a, not to get on track here, but there was the Austin Police Department provided a statement about something that their officers were in recently, and it was kind of a real good snapshot of the way it should be, and it no longer is. I can read it to you, Willie, or you can.
No, go ahead. I'm done describing the actions of what happened in this call. I think it's important because a lot of people they're not familiar with the situation, but that's it in a nutshell. So go ahead.
Okay, it's from the Austin Police Officers Association involving one of their officers being involved in a shooting. Talking about transparency. However, accountability must be grounded in facts, not assumptions. That's critical, right? Somebody should learn how to talk like that. It is crucial that both city leaders and the public allow the investigative process to unfold before making determinations about fault or discipline. That doesn't mean walking warrants before you have all of the facts. Our officers deserve the same fundamental fairness that every citizen is granted under the law. We urge their mayor and all city officials to exercise restraint, respect the investigative process and avoid statements that could prejudice outcomes or fuel unnecessary tension.
Wow.
It's like, that's a police association. That's saying, hey, don't rush to judgment. We don't know. That means you don't know. And it's important to say that. Again, we're not going to spend a lot of time on the SAPOA. We've done that already. But the contrast speaks volumes, I think.
Well, since we've already said a lot on the SAPOA, now that you make that comparison and what was said by our association president and what we see what an association president should say, I believe that our association president is not, and they made some deal with our chief that he wasn't going to blow him up on things that seemed controversial. And either he's doing it because he is on their side to do what's necessary in the political eyes, or he's just trying not to make waves with the chief for some sort of favor down the line for other officers. Because the association president, when someone gets in trouble and they get suspended or whatever's alleged that happened, just administratively a lot, they go to the association president. The association president, like the chief, let's say he divvies out some, what they call a contemplated discipline, 45 days, an indefinite suspension. You have the right, the officers have the right to go meet with the chief and discuss it and give their side. And I've done it before, and you hope for something less. If you get an indefinite suspension, which is equivalent to firing, anything short of losing your job is good. We've seen 1-year suspensions, haven't we?
Yeah. It doesn't happen a lot, but
it's happened before. So anything is good because you don't have to find a whole new career. But so the association president usually goes, and when I went before, it was Mike Kelly, so they go with you and they're on your side and try to make your argument if necessary. Mike didn't really say much. I spoke on my behalf and the chief said this. So there wasn't much for Mike to say at the time, but he was there with me.
Yeah, we had Mike on recently. If you haven't watched it, please watch it.
Right, the Mike Kelly podcast, which I'm sure is going to be on the video, as our editor truly likes to do and knows how to do. But so that's the case with the association president. But I wanted to say that because either one of those, whether he is trying not to make waves or he's complicit in his decisions, either one of them is not good.
Well, being complicit in decisions is a terrible thing to even contemplate. Complicit means you're in line with them. You're a party to it, right? So I'm not going to go that far. But what I will say is this wasn't doing anything. This was just urging calm, urgent objectivity.
Slow down.
Please don't rush to judgment. And I think that was fair. And I think anybody could do that without ruffling feathers or blowing up a chief or getting on cross-eyed.
But here's the other thing. When we say these things about rushing to judgment, for one, it does not look good. You watch a woman get shot by 3 police officers, have their guns pointed at more. A lot of people said like, all these big bad policemen are afraid of this hammer. No, it's not quite like that. It's not like they had a mutual fight or anything like that. So you have all these opinions with that. And again, those situations, it comes down to the legalities, which attorneys know, the chief and the department should know. And, of course, we have an internal affairs unit that also would investigate possible wrongdoing by these officers. They should know. And what's crazy is, the Thomas Villarreal and Carlos Castro case, we saw that they don't know. Yeah. And me and the other expert, Bobby Moreno, who worked on it, and it ends up in a mistrial, and then they eventually drop the charges on both of them. It just came to light. I said to him, hey, no disrespect, Bobby, but I was just a lowly detective, and you were just a lowly patrolman, and we're both retired. Why does it take us 2 guys to explain justified police action to the whole friggin' department? And I'm not saying we're
experience, effort, and want.
Sure.
That's what it boils down to.
Well, and we're also looking at it objectively. Now, I don't take every case.
Yeah, you want to learn more. You want to educate yourself.
Yeah.
We talked about that on the Villarreal and Jesse Allen podcast. And again, no slight on that IA investigator. And I won't get back into it. But just because you're in a unit don't mean you're ready to go in that unit. Don't mean you have the experience. And the same thing in this particular case. You can see the inexperience. You can see that there's inexperience in what they do, how they've handled it. They didn't have anybody really to fall back on. I don't care what they say. There was an immense amount of pressure coming from the top. I know 100%.
I'm waiting.
100%. And I guarantee you, because I've been in situations where officers under my command have been in shootings, and I've been right next to the chief, and I've heard him. His first phone call is to the deputy city manager, Maria Villagomez. And so, but with all these things coming up, that inexperience is showing, and we're pointing it at the officers when we should be saying, so where was this guy's sergeant? Where was this guy's lieutenant? Where was this guy's captain? Every prosecution.
Who are you referring to?
I'm talking about Soto, right?
The detective, Hanley detective.
The lead detective, okay. Right? Who? Yeah. This is his first officer-involved shooting. Literally the first one where he was the lead. He had worked night CID. This is a big case. As a matter of fact, I was thinking about it. I said, what other case could even kind of come in, compare in San Antonio? I'm not talking about the 7 guys that got wrapped up in the drugs in 2001. I'm talking about back in the 80s, and it wasn't even on duty, right? The Tucker and the Smith situation.
Yeah.
That's the last time something of this magnitude happened. You want to say, what did you expect was going to happen? But the inexperience shows, and it reeks, and it doesn't make the agency look good. It doesn't make us look like professionals that understand how to conduct an objective investigation. And I wouldn't even be surprised if it starts to taint some of the other investigations, because if we treat our own like this, how well are we doing investigations of murder victims in other matters where citizens may or may not be a part of the organization? It affects it.
Well, in Ron Soto's defense, I kind of equate it to, the old way of teaching a kid how to swim. I can't swim. You throw them in the pool, and let them see what they do. Yeah. Well, Ron couldn't swim because he's new. They threw him in a rushing river.
Yeah.
So to hand him a shooting of this magnitude involving 3 officers and then already alleging wrongdoing, they didn't do him any service. Because if you're going to try to nail these guys to the coffin, you probably want to get someone that can help you do that. And this guy, I don't know what kind of guidance he got, but it doesn't seem that way. And again, he's on the stand right now.
What kind of guidance can you get in 15 hours, Willie? What kind of guidance can you
get
when somebody's when you say on the stand, and the lawyer in Cifuentes says there were 15 officers on that scene, you didn't review 10 of the body-worn cameras.
But that's part of that.
Yeah.
That's part of that. That the initial, when he wrote up the arrest warrants, he only needed so much.
They need a probable cause.
Yeah, to get them arrested, right? So he starts that ball rolling. But the rest of the package to get him convicted is the other thing.
But those are two different things.
Two different things.
Because and I'll say this because I know a lot of people are saying that when Ben and I think Jason Gosser hammered him on not putting certain things in the affidavit, you can tell from one day to the next somebody told him, not coached him, probably just advised him, that an affidavit for arrest is just there to contain probable cause. And then you do the rest in your prosecution guide in order to prepare for trial, ultimately hoping to get a conviction, right? And you can see that because from one day to the next, he was an answer. But, his first statements that he said on the stand when he got to that scene is, I had some concerns. I didn't have any rush judgment, but I had concerns.
Why
would you say that?
Yeah, but you should have concerns.
But concerns about what? Because the concerns came across as though I had concerns that maybe this wasn't a righteous Syria. How do you know that? Were you talking before you got there? Of course they were talking.
It's really not even worth mentioning, even from someone that, let's say this whole situation was legitimate. You shouldn't say it at all.
It was a spontaneous statement that served no purpose.
No, and he said it early on. He said it early on.
And then as the trial goes on, and I know we're jumping up here, but he says something like at one point he says, there were a lot of things in this case I would have done differently. Really? How about these 3 guys that are facing life in prison? Those are the things in the inexperienced part that I'm talking about. And it's just sad that they're out there because now we're talking about this and a lot of people are making very hardline decisions or coming up with very hardline thoughts about this guy. And no one's really saying, where was the training?
Yeah.
Where was the senior guy sitting there right there going lockstep with him?
That's one part of it. But the other part of it is just like you mentioned. There's absolutely no way you saw everything you needed to see within that small time frame. Absolutely not. And that alone, you already know that they didn't give these officers any sort of due diligence.
Well, they said they didn't give everybody the benefit of the doubt, but they.
Right. They said that. So we already know that. I believe, and I wish they would ask me. If I do get on the stand and ask me what I thought with that, I'm going to flat out say it. It was done for political purposes. The chief wiped his hands of these guys. He got them arrested. He can, parade them in front of the news. He made the statements. He's credible to a lot of people. He should be. And so Chief's got to be right. He throws out that narrative that they did something wrong, and he gets the ball rolling. And what it also happens, and I've said this before, I think he's a coward. Because what's going to happen if he didn't arrest these guys, these leftist groups like Act for SA, our leftist city council are going to say, wait a minute, these guys are on suspension with pay? And one of them, Jalen McGee Rodriguez, said this, well, before the last contract, these guys would have been on a paid vacation. what does that mean?
We talked about it in another podcast.
Yeah.
That's a paid vacation with the stress and not being able to handle things.
Well, you think these guys just said, hey, guys, I don't have to go to work anymore. Let's go to Jamaica.
It doesn't help much when you have people making sidebar comments, which is just police nature. I guess we're going to get some overtime.
But everybody listens to that.
Yeah.
That's the problem. McKee Rodriguez is supposed to have some credibility. Yeah. So he has constituents that listen to him and all this other stuff.
At the end of the day, you can see that. But, even the banner, right, for the media, I mean, this thing is being blasted out. I was telling Willie and Nick, I said, I just decided to go on I got to watch the time here. But I just decided to go on TikTok because there's some TikToks that are actually coming out from the Hood Norton group, right? And I decided to put it in the TikTok. I said, one is, let me just stop right here. The actual banner that they show every day is completely biased. It says the killing of Melissa Pettis. SAPD officers on trial, the killing of Melissa Pettis. And then what they usually show up is all three of these officers are facing life in prison. And then on one of them, I have a shot. I'll give it to you, Nick, and you can put it up. It says officers charged after 2023 shooting during a mental health crisis. Of course, pushing that narrative again, right? This is on KSAT almost every day. And then it says body cam shows Pettis with a hammer before officers fired. Okay. And then it says SAPD chief says action violated department policy. Again, that is different than could they use, are they authorized legally to employ deadly force? They were being attacked with a hammer. But you can see, this is the way it is, those subtle messages that those messages they're sending to the public that don't know, that are reading this and jumping to conclusions and not taking that cool reflection to try to figure out, okay, what really happened? And unfortunately, that's what's occurring.
There's so much that comes out daily. This trial is, in its third week, and people are like surprised that it's gone on this long. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, these officers, they're represented by the LaHood Norton law group. They're represented by the Christian Nisbet Casillas law group and Ben Cifuentes law group. And I tell you, man, these guys are the A team of defense. Yeah. No doubt. Not because I'm working for them, but because I know them. I know them personally. I've known Nico LaHood before he was an attorney.
Yeah, he came on our podcast too. If you haven't watched it, you should check it out. It was very candid.
Bing, bing, right? Yeah. It pops up. So these guys, all of them, genuinely love law enforcement. They're not just doing a job because, hey, that's what I'm hired to do. They really care. They really do. And
they're defense attorneys, and some of the most premier criminal defense attorneys.
One of my friends mentioned, they were like, I really didn't care for attorneys, but I love these guys.
Well, check this out. So
defense attorneys.
Nico LaHood, Jay Norton, Jason Goss, Mario Del Prado, Ben Cifuentes, Tom Nesbitt, Chris Newman. I think I might be leaving one out. These are the top level criminal defense attorneys. Yeah, I think I got Jay Norton. Top level criminal defense attorneys in the city of San Antonio, and they have teamed up to work together to give these guys fair representation. So yeah, this is an A-list, man. This is something that I haven't seen before. I don't know. I haven't seen this number of people in a criminal trial agreeing to co-counsel and work together on a case where the defendants clearly needed that level of representation. This is an amazing thing.
So LaHood Norton has taken the lead on it. So the other ones have understood that, but they all really work in unison together. So when I'm there, now obviously I'm not there right now because I'm doing this, but there's other things. I have to sometimes leave, pick up the kids and do this other stuff. But the good thing is if it's live feed, I can watch it, I can catch up. I can also rewatch it, for my own benefit, so I can hear something that I thought, or listen to something that I thought that I might have heard, or to see if I was right about it. But these guys are working in tandem so well. And the other part is when I'm there, come lunch, if they do have a lunch, we get a conference room where everybody brings their lunch, whatever, Nico's this health nut, so he's eating grass and drinking water, and of course he's making fun of what I'm eating because he's watching everybody, everybody's like, hey, because he's going to have some comment of it, but we kick back, but they're still talking about the case. And I don't hear any arguing. They're not like, well, I don't think you should have done that. I don't think that, You don't see it. These guys are like, they're picking up. It truly is a tag team. I'm next. Because after Ben, I believe Ben is still questioning. Jason questioned Soto, who's the lead detective now that's on there. After Ben, then Nisbet and Newman will come up. So
let me just say, Ben has done an exceptional job because he knows the policy well. I wouldn't venture to say he knows the policy better than almost.
That's why a lot of policemen hire him for arbitration.
And he methodically is going to hold you accountable. He's not attacking you. He's not degrading you. He's not trying to showcase your weakness. He's just showing that you aren't ready and you didn't conduct a thorough investigation. I wanted to say something because I just don't want to miss it. The district attorney, Joe Gonzalez, signs off on everything in a podcast that we have with Dylan Carter. Might want to watch that one too. We did a little bit about it, and Dylan wound up talking to the DA. The DA says something like, "That's my name on the door. I sign off everything that happens in that office." So he signed off on this. He tells Salinas, right, in a pretrial motion, that if they would have been...
This is Harris.
Yeah, exactly right there, Harris. And at the end of the day, that's a pretty sad state of affairs. But they're using this Castle doctrine, and I can read it to you, but they're saying that Melissa Pettis would have been justified in hitting him with that hammer up to and including killing him. And then, of course, Salinas does a good job. We have that sound for you. It's not going to be verbatim. It's kind of, just kind of giving it to you in an overview.
So you understand that the state's theory of the case is that Melissa Pettis, if she had hit you with a hammer and killed you, she would have been right to do so.
That's what they told me at pre-trial, yes.
I mean, how do you feel about that?
Upset.
Why did it upset you?
That they're giving her right, that somebody was willing to take my life away. Saying that she had the right to protect her property when I was attempting to arrest her for a felony that she committed.
And then he says, "How'd that make you feel?" And and I think he just said, "Upset."
It's upset, yeah.
But at the end of the day, the message that the DA is sending now is very different. And that kind of goes to, is this going to have long-standing effects on what goes on in San Antonio with their police department and their citizens? Because if they were to get convicted, then every criminal out there is going to start saying, "Hey, if you don't have a warrant, I don't think you have the justification to come in here, then I'm going to hurt you."
Which most of them don't think that.
And the Castle doctrine it wasn't meant for that. These are uniformed police officers. If you don't think their actions are legitimate, you can file an administrative complaint. You can sue them civilly. There's a lot of different recourses. That many police officers are not going to hurt you. They're just going to take you into custody. And I don't know if you want me to read the Castle doctrine, but I think it's important.
Yeah.
Just real quick. So it says, is a legal doctrine to designate a person's abode as a place in which that person has protections and immunity and immunities permitting one in certain circumstances to use force, including deadly force, against an intruder free from legal prosecution for the consequences of the force used. Do you really think they're talking about uniformed police officers, uniformed deputies, uniformed or designated federal agents? No, this is not. So it's a complete stretch, and it's really kind of breaching a very dangerous line in terms of what may or may not happen with people out there, because even if they change their mind later, an officer, a deputy, a federal agent, someone could be shot because they heard that they can do that legally. That's a terrible, terrible thing to do. And shame on you, Joe Gonzalez.
Well, when they told Salinas that, so this was 2 years ago, Salinas only had 4 years on. So here's a rookie listening to this, and they're telling him, what's he going to do? Argue with them? Yeah. He's just going to like, oh my God, okay, and he was actually pretty well spoken. I like
Salinas did a really good
job.
I
think he did a good job for a young man. He knew his job well. Salinas, if you listen to this, I commend you. And that's what every officer should be like, is like you, that takes their job seriously. The first officer, Rojas, wow. Wow.
Since you're working on it, let me chime in on Rojas. I think you should spend more time trying to understand what's expected of you as a uniformed patrol officer for San Antonio. I think you should understand the rules. I think you should understand the rules of regs. I think you should understand what your expectations are. I think you should work on your witness testimony I think you should present better as a professional. I'm not slamming you. I don't know you. Probably take it that way. But I guarantee you, people are seeing the same thing. And when you're in trial like this, you got to come across as somebody that is a professional and understands what their responsibilities are.
Well, said he only testified one other time.
In 9 years. And, you know, and if you were to just really go to be candid about it, why is that? You work Southside. You never picked up anybody for resisting, evading, unlawfully carrying, no drug arrests. And I won't say, but I can tell you there's a lot of people, and I'm not going to say this to him, but if you're not testifying in 9 years, it's because you either write bad reports or you got a bad reputation. Those are the only two things. Or you're just lazy, right?
Or you're really, really good.
Yeah. Or you're really good.
Yeah, right? Really, really good.
But that didn't come across.
No, not at all with that. But it is, again, as this trial goes on, there's something new every day to learn from and to talk about. I am getting, while I'm sitting there in the background behind the defense, I am getting texts from people. I get, some people that are working, they'll go back and they'll be watching it. So then later I'm getting texts because you can tell they're watching it, and I've got a couple of knuckleheads that are messing with me about my hair. Harold Rainey and Renee Salas are jacking with me. They're taking screenshots of the YouTube.
Have a little fun with you.
Yeah, it's funny. It's awesome because I dish it out to them. But and then I have some civilian friends that really are not in law enforcement that are just intrigued by what's going on, and they have questions. They're obviously police supporters. So you have to think about those people that really support the police, and some of them are really active with us, like they donate to the 100 Club. They do these events because they really care. But to see, and I hope that, because they have to see this, and I hope it's enough for them to speak up, to go, this can't be happening to our law enforcement, especially when this case turns out in the way that I think it's going to turn out, that these guys are going to be exonerated and they're going to have to fight for their jobs back.
That's a great point, Willie, because when you look at the layman, right, the citizens you don't really know, imagine what they're thinking watching this, and then during the Salinas testimony, they're halted. They have a sidebar. They bring in an attorney. They consult with Salinas. He pleads the fifth and leaves the step. Most of the time, if you say, I plead the fifth, automatically people say, well, I don't even want to say anything. Why? Because he doesn't want to implicate.
So obviously it was at the advice of his attorney.
It was at the advice of his attorney. Yeah. But then if you take it a little further, because we can't assume that everyone's watching the trial, right? Some people say, I'm watching it, get right to it. A lot of people aren't because they have jobs and responsibilities, other things, right? But at the end of the day, it's because they didn't grant immunity, because one of the things that they were saying is they could eventually charge him with burglary if they went inside of the house. It's just trash all the way around. But if you're a citizen, you see this, you have all these different variables happening in one trial. And you're like, okay, the cops had to have done something wrong. Well, no, because the state didn't want to give him immunity, but they wanted to give the other ones immunity.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's say I wrote up a warrant for narcotics, and not saying narcotics, say an arrest warrant, okay? Looking for a person, mind you. And so if you write an arrest warrant, you're looking for a person, and you make entry to go get them, you can't be searching in drawers or
the scope of the search.
Yeah, the scope of the search, because there's obviously not a person that's going to be hidden in there. Yeah. And if you do open that drawer and you find, let's say, a kilo of dope, what happens with that? And let's say you keep on searching.
Just like these guys have said, they'll just file a motion to suppress. It's outside the scope of the search, and it'll be thrown out as evidentiary. In terms of,
now, if it's in plain view,
then you can use it.
You can seize it, but to search those little areas, then you go write another warrant, right, to be able to search those areas with the scope of the search. So I described it that if they're alleging that these three officers, and I'm pretty sure I can say this, committed these murders, and therefore because of that, and what you just mentioned with the Castle Doctrine, that they're alleging that they were trying to enter illegally on her, then the officers that pointed their guns at her are guilty of, or should be charged with aggravated assault, the deadly weapon, and the officers that went in, not to save her life, but they were trying to be charged with burglary. And that's where they had to halt, because what they did was they cherry-picked these three officers.
Of course.
Because again, of the optics part of it, I don't want to arrest all of them. Well, just like a search warrant. Well, if you get rid of
what do
this,
they call that? like, what do they call it when they said, why did you, because the other day they said, well, why, if this person, the female, I'm sorry, I don't remember her name.
Pettis?
It was a female officer.
Oh, Salinas.
And she had a gun. If she would have shot, would she be sitting here too? If 3 others would have shot, would they be sitting here and these would not be? And then they made the argument, weren't they all guilty? And the legal term for that is party to the offense, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's a party to the offense. But you see, the thing about it is, it's really sad is because the job for the prosecution should be to let justice prevail. I know I'm sounding like a little flag waving guy, but at the end of the day, it should let justice prevail. When you're secreting evidence like that, or not getting it, or cherry picking it, then you're not doing that. It's almost like you're intentionally trying to get a guilty verdict when you're withholding evidence. And they've ruled on that a couple of times in different state courts where prosecutions have withheld exculpatory evidence. And I say exculpatory because they asked the handling detective, what exculpatory evidence did he have? And he didn't understand at least he said he didn't understand what the word exculpatory meant. You're a homicide detective. Again, you have to learn the skills of your craft or don't work there, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah. And I mean, what kind of training do they get? You know, when I became a detective, I went through 2 weeks. One was evidence gathering, you know, and the other one was detective school, really, which just showed you how to do prosecution guides and, you know, all the forms and how to get onto this and do that. That was it, not the investigative part.
Well, they obviously don't give them enough training to keep some personal comments to yourself. Somebody wrote something, a former detective in homicide. I have a lot of respect for him. He may or may not be on this podcast, which you can watch as well. You know, he wrote something on there and it says this guy kind of made up his opinion, didn't like the way he handled it, so he arrested him for murder. Again, that's not your position to make. That's out the scope of what your role is. Your role is to investigate the facts of the case, make a determination, get them all, turn it into your supervisor, and then take it over to the DA's office and let a grand jury, you know, ultimately indict them or choose to no bill them. This wasn't Jeffrey Dahmer. None of these guys were. And they damn sure want Tommy Lynn Sales. That might be a podcast. You know, but at the end of the day, there was no reason to rush. And I keep going back to one question. Why? Why would a new detective to the officer involved shooting rush to find probable cause? It doesn't make sense. No one would do that. You know, at the end of the day, they were telling him to make the arrest. And it's coming out now through the cross-examination. He did not have complete understanding of all the facts relative to the totality of the circumstance. You know, and it's like, those are important things.
I've been saying over and over and over again to anybody that's in law enforcement, learn your legal justifications on force. Treat this like a profession. Learn your case law. And in this situation, you mentioned totality of the circumstances. That's in Graham versus Connor. That is one of your most foundational legal cases that really support officers' the investigation to officers for alleged excessive force. That's where it starts. And what I've seen, not just with this case, but with the other one with Thomas and Carlos, is that our own department are not following that and being guided by that to look at the totality of the circumstances. And one thing that I have said, and specifically to some of the past cases, what we see is that whenever this narrative is started of alleged wrongdoing by our own department, then they only investigate to prove that wrongdoing, not the totality of the investigation.
Or launch a full-scale investigation on who leaked information that the mayor was now getting 24-hour-a-day security, right? From on-duty personnel.
Yeah, that's
or, you know, who launched a full-blown investigation into why a letter was sent anonymously to the city manager talking about a culture that has gone awry. You know, it's so funny because there's a couple of things you got to get in real quick. You know, when they talk about totality of the circumstances and then the department is pushing transparency, you know, something they call the guiding principles. So just coincidence, right? They're advertising for members to get on the CARB, right? Civilian members, we've talked about that, right? There's 7 of them.
CARB is Citizens Action Review Board.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the Complainant Administrative Review Board, and it has citizens that are on it, right? And at the end of the day, this is what it says. Get involved in your community. The San Antonio Police Department is currently accepting applications for the Complaint and Administrative Review Board for volunteers, for citizens. The voluntary board meets year-round to hear and review officer misconduct cases and provide recommendations to the chief of police. It is a powerful way to support transparency and accountability in our city. We've talked a lot about the lack of real transparency in the police department, and I think it's going to come out, because I'm hoping that if the defense needs to, they start bringing the captain of homicide, the deputy chief over that bureau, that division, and people in there to say, where did this come from? Because I guarantee you it came from the top, from the chief of police and the 2 assistant chiefs. But anyway, they like to throw around transparency as much. If you read a lot of the comments on posts that you made and others, policemen have strong opinions about this. Emotions are high, of course. But almost all of them say, if you believe that the chief didn't have a hand in this, you really need help. You know. And
well, speaking in the interest of transparency, I mean, why do we have body cams now?
Yeah.
This is for the accountability that everybody screams for. Okay, they're here, and it's technology. How could you have this type of technology and not use it on the police? I get it, no doubt. But when it came to the police, actually, it was helping the officers more than it was hurting them, which is fine. Okay, officers have to turn it on and off. They're very strict on how they operate the camera, when they should turn it on, when they mute it. They can get written up for that, get in trouble for that, and all. Okay, these are the officers in uniform. Of course, you have your field supervisors, your sergeants. Why aren't the captain, lieutenant, in these types of situations, when they're having their meetings, why isn't there recordings of it? We should be able to hear that. Now, that doesn't mean it's foolproof. That doesn't mean that they can talk about it through text and later. I get it, but there should be.
No, I don't know that I would. I think we've had this conversation before. I don't know that I would totally agree with that, because you got to have the autonomy.
Because you were a captain.
Of course. Right?
That's
I'm
why.
that guy. I'm the other guy. But I say that because I was a captain and a lieutenant before that. But I think we have to have the autonomy to have some real legitimate conversations and exercise all options. And I think once you take these conversations and you make them public, and all body cams, all recordings are subject to open records requests, then it kind of changes the landscape. All of that wouldn't even be in play if people were being honest about what really happened. Switching back over to the officer-involved shootings, 20 in 3 years. We've had 20. The closest other ones, Phoenix has had 5. I'm talking about officers being shot. Houston has had 3, I think. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania has had 2. New York City, right? Under 2.5. Dallas, Texas, under 2.5. Austin, Texas, 1. So if you're looking at these numbers, and if you look at the graph, and we'll have it up for you, but I mean, it's just so drastically different of what's happened in San Antonio. I wanted to get to one more quick statement before we talk about why some of these things are happening, or at least why we believe some of these things are happening. This is something that the other homicide detective said. Her last name is Pratt. Don't remember her first name. Deanna Pratt. One is she looked like she was thrown in the deep end of the pool. I don't know her. I'm not going to bash her, but the bright lights were a lot for her. She says, I was just told to take the statement. That's it. I didn't even want to look at a video. Like, you're an investigator. You got to do something more. But at the end of the day, at one point, she says, on an unrelated topic, what I learned that day, that an officer doesn't have the discretion they think they have. So this is the statement she made on the stand. A different incident, of course. So you really think that this Detective Soto had the discretion to make this call on his own?
No way.
But at the end of the day, you can just see that they're contradicting themselves all the time. Because anybody that's ever been around that just can see the way this administration works, nothing goes down, especially on a high-profile case in which 3 sworn members of the police department are going to be immediately arrested, charged with murder, and then fired, are not going to have the input of the chief of police and the direction from City Hall. That's going to happen every time, and it happened this time.
Well, I'm not saying this about her, and no disrespect to women or anything like that. But as what we're seeing now, a lot of positions and people placed in positions are not just of sheer ability or qualifications. A lot of it's DEI. And we're seeing that. Not to mention our own department, we've lost a lot of experience.
Tons of experience. So now you don't have much left to pick from. Now, Deanna's been on a little while. I've never heard anything bad about her. I know her personally, not real well, but I just by what I saw in her testimony,
I believe what she said. Like, I just did this, but nonetheless, it's up on you to conduct yourself a certain way if you're given this task.
Absolutely.
Right? And if you should take pride in what you're doing and therefore do it thoroughly with that. She wasn't lying about not knowing about this, but here's the one thing she did emphasize was her own biased opinion of it. That was very explosive on there because I heard from a lot of people. Again, and it raised the concerns of the attorneys, the defense attorneys, like, oh, really? Because now you're holding yourself up high. You stood up on your chair and said, I know why they did this. Oh, do you?
I know why they were indicted.
Yeah. Oh, do you? And so that's where the stack of cards started falling for her with it. But it's throwing everybody.
Really. I don't know. It's easy. I don't know her easy. And it's easy for us here because I was joking with a friend the other day. I said, you know what a case like this does to people like us? We all become lawyers, but we're not lawyers. Right? Yeah. But at the end of the day, we have experience. We've been around lawyers, and we've been in trial. We've testified, and we've grown through our times in our career to be able to do those things better. I think there needs to be a lot of growth and training in order to make them better. I don't know her at all. I can tell you this, that she seemed very edgy, very defensive, couldn't really justify her actions. But what she's saying is true. If somebody says take that statement, then she took that statement. She just needed to be articulated a little bit better. We were talking too about a pattern. So you were talking about patterns, right? And why are things happening? So we had an officer involved shooting October 15, officer that I know his family very well. No slide on anything that happened there. But when the chief made his statement, Nick, we'll have that sound for you. The chief says, well, the officer was over here with a cadet, but he was actually with a probationary officer, right? So again, how much are you being briefed? And there's a guy on the other side of the fence, and this guy was taunting them. And this is literally how the chief responded, real flippant, they ignored it.
So there were two officers, actually an officer and a cadet, sitting in the parking lot here before the call came out. The individual that was being called on was taunting them from the other side of the fence. They ignored him, and at that moment, the 911 call came out, and the officer pulled up on that end. Before all this happened, he started walking away and walking in the back of the building, walking back around, and he came out, and he told the officers, I'm not going back to prison. I'm not going back to jail. And at that point, he started running, and as he was running, he started pulling at his waistband, pulled out a pistol, and the officers and the suspect exchanged gunfire. The suspect is down in the parking lot. Two officers are at the hospital. Both were hit in the arm. One of the officers was hit in another location, but they're both going to be okay, notwithstanding the injuries that they have now.
So, okay, fine, that wound up turning into a shooting. But if we go back a little bit, there was an incident about a month and a half ago in which a guy started taunting, again, now we're seeing this word being used, officers on the northwest side, what we call crew, and he wound up wrecking 3 police cars. The officers did not chase them. He wound up, they disengaged. He came back and taunted them, really, found the officers. Hey, here I am, chase me, let's go. Trying to get people to fight him, trying to get people to chase him. They go back to the substation. Then he goes and finds a park police officer, does the same thing with them. Nobody engages with them. And it's so, I'm not throwing shade at these guys. My point is, I almost understand why they're not doing it.
Well, and I think it's important, because we're doing a segue now, I think it's important to say things like this, what's going on now, the other cases that you and I talked about, Thomas Villarreal, Carlos Castro, Oscar Cruz, Andre Vargas, and there's others.
And the list goes on.
The list goes on. We had this chief talking about what his plan was for the operations of the department. He wanted to have 60% of our officers doing proactive activity and 40% handling calls. And what we're talking about, after stuff like this, no one wants to do proactive activity. They really don't want to answer calls that might blow up like this. That's just the truth. I don't know what he thinks is going to happen with that, but we're starting to get away from that. And so what it does, it's kind of what we call it's snake bites. They're just afraid of doing anything because of the potential that it might blow up. And that is very true. Sometimes calls that seem like the most simple calls turn out to be, they just blow up to something. That's just the way it is. Sometimes there's limited information, suspect's gone, all of a sudden he comes back, before there's not enough time to get that information to. That's why an officer's supposed to be on their toes with this stuff. So, and what David's talking about, so now when you do answer a call and you have someone, because that was a call for service, and you have someone that's doing that, and back in our day, we had guys acting a fool over here trying to get our attention. My answer to that was, oh, you want some attention? I'm here to give you some attention. And that's how you get in to these people's lives and see what's up with them. Because here we are determined about or concerned about mental health issues. What kind of idiot is going to taunt the police to do something active with them? So yeah, we should get into their lives, because it's not just us. What if we leave them alone, they go out and do something else because they're mentally ill or whatever. So
they never identified him, as far as I know. They just went and recovered it, found out.
No, they don't know who he is. They don't know who he is.
Got away with it, bragging rights all across whatever side of town. One of the responses,
I was hoping he was live streaming it.
Yeah, one of the responses that got back to me was that the deputy chief kind of did an informal after-action report, right? And so that's fine, right? Talk about what happened so you can apply what you learn. But in this thing, at one point, he says something like, "Nobody was injured." And this is what he said, his exact words, because I was told this exact, but only 3 patrol vehicles were damaged. Only. And so it's just, you can see the mentality, the shift in kind of the perception, the understanding.
Well, let's hold on to what you just said with that, okay? Let's hold on. Only 3 were damaged, okay? We'll hold on to that, because it's going to come up with the further in this conversation where we're leading to. But the point is that you are, what we're seeing because of these things that are happening to the officers, our own department doesn't have these officers' backs, okay? And we definitely know the DA doesn't. In fact, they're trying to create stuff to get you hung up on, because that's what George Soros bought our DA for. It's out, it's obvious, that's what he's supposed to do. This stuff going on behind us is exactly what they're supposed to do. We've seen it in Baltimore. Travis County has a Soros DA. Harris County has one. We've seen it across Bragg in New York. Same way, Letitia James, San Francisco, Seattle. And none of them are good. They're not doing anything that's even justly and lawful. They're actually looking, they don't find a crime and investigate it. They find a person and create a crime and to throw at them. That's what's going on with these people. So, and you want to go on with this situation that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, really, that's really pretty much what I wanted to say. I mean, we were thinking about maybe talking about it a little more, but, this isn't about bashing that deputy chief. It's not. It's about the mentality that's starting to take place with the rank and file. And unfortunately, the citizens don't really understand what that means, because when you have a police department that's afraid to engage because of stuff like this, I mean, a minute ago, they showed that sergeant, the other day, they showed that sergeant's expression at the time of the shooting. I'm going to get you that still so you can put it up in case people haven't been watching. This sergeant was in fear for his life.
Yeah. That wasn't an act of any sort.
No.
Or embellishment.
And at the end of the day, when you have this, the citizens really don't know what that's going to mean to them, because crime is on the rise. People are getting burglarized, assaulted. The homicide rate fluctuate. I think it was 125 or 127 last year. We put out that there was over 160 officer-involved shootings since 2019, and now we're talking about 20 officers have been literally shot in the last 3 years. So when you, as a citizen, have a police department that's afraid to do their job because they don't feel like they're going to be supported, or they're going to be indicted and charged for murder or charged with a criminal crime, charged with a crime, then at the end of the day, they're going to be doing less. And then you're not going to get in the service that you think you want, or we hope that you want. So those are things that need to be really processed a little bit. That's kind of all I really wanted to say about this. I know at some point we're going to come on and talk about this trial again at its conclusion, where you can be a little bit more open about it. But there's a lot of moving parts to what's going on here. I think this trial can potentially change the landscape of policing in San Antonio and the way that police officers police in San Antonio.
Well, I think we've gotten to a point of no return, because we've let them develop these tactics that don't work, these phrases, tactical disengagement, tactically retreating, de-escalation, total bullshit words that make it sound like it's on purpose, and we're already there. So what happens is if we say, no, offense works better than defense. So we need to let these officers start being more offensive. Okay, let's see it. But the moment somebody gets hurt or killed and it doesn't look clear cut, they're going to go, see, that's why it doesn't work, because they cherry pick those things. We're talking about an overall, overall in the stats. To me, and the way I grew up, and I know the way you grew up, offense works better than defense. And crime is high because officers are not driving around looking for suspicious activity and checking it out. They don't want to because of how it might blow up in these situations and they possibly get indicted. Now, we did one. Here's another ding. You may beat the rap, but not the ride. We did a podcast, and this is what this is. These people they got the rap, and this is the ride right here. And this is a friggin' worse than any roller coaster you can get on in this world, because these guys' lives are on the line. And they may, because no one, we hold ourselves to a certain standard as law enforcement that, we're the good guys. We try to be truthful and ethical and moral and obviously a warrior, along with those traits like that. And these guys are about to become what they were fighting against, felons, and possibly do jail time with other felons.
It says right there, up to life in prison, right? It doesn't matter what we think they would actually be sentenced to, up to life and in prison.
So along with what we're talking about, these officers not wanting to do these things is, again, because of this, and what we're talking about, things that we believe pushed from the top down. This incident you're talking about where this guy was taunting these officers, there's an email that got put out. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah, and I kind of synopsized it a little bit. I just didn't want to bore everybody with reading it.
Well, I wouldn't say read it, but let's get to the point, because this was from a deputy chief.
Yeah, it was deputy chief.
It's still active.
Yeah,
yes.
Deputy chief.
Who puts this email out because he heard about this situation. The guy's smart guy, so articulates it very well, describes the action. What did he pretty much want to say about that?
I mean, really, at the end of the day, what he was trying to do, but he kept it really, really, really kind of at the point where he could twist it any time. But he was trying to come from a good place. It was an after-action report trying to say, hey, look, at the end of the day, this would have been a situation where you can pursue, and you should have maybe pursued. But he's also talking about, Monday morning quarterback and the difficulties of being supervised and making those calls. I mean, again, this isn't to bash him. I think he was really trying to do a good thing. The problem with it is the trust has already been eroded, with the rank and file in the upper administration. And I'm hesitant. I'm just going to say with this guy too, in particular.
I know I was like, what are you talking about, man?
No, I'm talking about Miles Zero.
Yeah.
And and again, my intent wasn't to bash him, but he put it on. He put this out, and I know he came from a good place here. But when your people think you're selling them snake oil, they're not going to fall for the same banana in the tailpipe thing, because at the end of the day, if they would have chased him, and they would have ran into somebody, or got in an accident, or got into a situation where somebody
which meant what I said. You talked about only 3 vehicles were damaged by this guy. But had they chased, and they would have crashed 3 vehicles chasing him, that wouldn't have been as stated as so lightly.
The thing about it is, would you have hung as tough? Would you have stood strong and said, hey, I support those officers? No, because he was also, again, we're getting into an area that this has no really bearing on this. But he was capped for Thomas Villarreal. He was tapped in for Carlos, right? Mm-hmm. And Jesse Allen.
Yes.
So, when again, you're talking about these patterns. So it's not necessarily to say, I don't believe what you did was coming from a good place. But once you lose a certain element of trust from the rank and file, you're just not going to get it back with an email. It's not what you say, it's what you do.
It goes to getting to cherry picking incidents. Yeah. I saw a video the other day on the San Antonio Police Department Facebook page, and the chief is up there, and he's talking about an incident. And I don't remember. I thought I'd seen it before because I don't think it was a situation that happened lately. But he's talking about an officer arriving to a call. Guy opens the door a little bit, talking to him, and the officer goes in. The guy falls back. The guy grabs a machete, comes at the officer, and the officer shoots him. And the reporters asked, after describing that, guy comes at him with a machete. Reporter asks a stupid question. Well, was the officer in fear of his life? It's a stupid question, but maybe she's just trying to be thorough for the soundbite. I'm going to give him that benefit of the doubt. But the chief, holding himself, well, Well, yeah, the officer feared for his life. That's what officers do.
Yeah.
They shoot people in their fear of their lives.
No,
That's
he's a
what freaking
homicidal
happened.
maniac in a badge. He was hoping
That's
for
what
the
happened
judge.
here.
Yeah, exactly what happened.
But you're not saying that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the reason this is so easy is because it's some crook with a machete. Because it's easy to explain. You know, and I've always said that for them to be able to say, well, the guy had a gun, they had to shoot him. I mean, oh, okay. Yeah,
Well, in the podcast where Nico was kind enough to come on, former district attorney and an alias criminal defense attorney, which you're seeing now, you know, super charismatic, can do it all. You know, even eat grass, according to you, right? Because he's healthy. But, you know, at the end of the day, we asked him a question at one point. You know, at this point, you know, we've seen this with these cases. We've seen this with the chief of police. We've seen this with the association. Please watch the podcast if you haven't. And one of us says, hey, is he ever going to speak up for the rank and file? And Nico's response was, well, probably not, or it doesn't appear so. And so, you know, at the end of the day, you're never going to get that from them because they're too worried about keeping their positions, and they're not worried enough about having a moral compass to say, I'm going to do the right thing. The right thing has to come first. But they always expect you to do the right thing. And that's where that BS with the transparency for the civilians or citizens of the CARB. Because I'll say this, you can join the CARB, you can get on there, you get selected by city council and approved by or the other way around, like I think you get approved by, you get selected by the deputy city manager or the city manager and approved by council. But what they'll never tell you is that the chief doesn't have to abide by what you recommend, and rarely does if the situation doesn't work for the best interests of the city. And so he'll just dismiss it, and it's not open for public open records requests, so nobody ever knows about it. So it's a feel-good thing, but until you get people with a good moral compass at the head of an organization that's going to support their troops, you're never going to get it. You just stop.
No, and an officer or detective brought this up because he felt like he got wronged on a transfer. He was working as a liaison with the ATF, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, you're gone and we're putting this guy in there. And he was upset, not because he liked the job. He didn't do anything wrong. In fact, the ASAC wanted to keep him, spoke up about him. And he made a really good statement, because he says, you know, on our guiding principles, fairness, integrity, compassion, he goes, who's that for? It sure the hell wasn't for me. Yeah. You know, because they did not give me, I mean, I get that they're going to transfer me out, but why not give me a heads up and go, hey, we're probably going to put someone in your place, find a new home, something that fits your schedule and all that. But instead, they shoot him right back to uniform evidence detective, East Dog Watch, because you lose your seniority and stuff. And again, that how hard is that?
Yeah, we talked about it in that podcast where we specifically talked about that. Beat the rap, but you can't beat the ride. We also talked about how they move command personnel on a Wednesday, and they have to be out on Saturday, and there's no legitimate transfer of command, no legitimate briefing, no update, no whatever. And that's just not an efficient organization. But man, I know it was hard for you to take off, to come out here and do this thing, man. I appreciate you. I think it's important we talk about it. Everybody else and their mothers talking about it. I feel like we actually know a little bit. I wanted to say, I know there's a lot of people going to say, hey, policies were violated. Policies probably were violated. Command notification wasn't made. And I can go on and on and on. But again, that has nothing to do with Chapter 9 of the Penal Code, the use of force and the use of deadly force. You've got to be able to separate from one from the other. So before you guys start continuing to jab, because you see the little emails or the little posts going back and forth, you know, people have strong opinions about it. Let this play out. We'll come back on.
Well, hopefully by the time this comes out and it's edited, and Public Alliance is doing a great job for us, that this trial is over in a favorable way for these officers. And obviously, I mean, this is going to be a whole podcast that we're going to do on this trial and all the other things. It seems like we talked about a lot already, but there's a lot more because it's not done. You can see it in the background. This is still across.
Yeah, say that the defense hasn't even put on.
Yeah, the defense hasn't put on their own case, so it's going to be pretty long. So, and like you mentioned, give these officers the benefit of the doubt. If you really hold yourself to some sort of ethical standard, do your homework before you open your friggin' mouth, and especially you police officers. And I've been trying to make a little short video to kind of put out on Facebook. I keep on screwing it up, but I don't want it to be too long. I want it to be, you know, just enough for them to know to support these guys, because the only ones that are in there supporting them are us, but we are getting paid to do it. But there's no other police officers in there. One guy that's there to support Villalobos, but their family's there. That's fine. The association was there twice that I saw, 3 times. I'm going to give them that. But these guys are fighting for their lives, man.
You talked about it, the Bernal trial, right? I mean, it's almost the Bernal trial. We did a podcast on how the gallery was empty.
Yes.
But I think this one's
that
a
one
little
too.
bit different in the fence, because I've been watching it from home. I did go by there yesterday. My daughter was in town testifying in a separate criminal case, but she was an SAPD officer. So I did spend a little time in there. But, it's a little different because I think a lot of people are really tuning in. Of course, it's harder for them to see the support if they're not there. So, yeah, absolutely. If you can go in an afternoon, sit down and listen to some of this in person, it makes it.
But reach out to these guys through somebody and say, hey, man, I support you. And rightfully so, we talk about with our own podcast, there's a lot of closet watchers, and a lot of them are afraid to say things because of the retaliation they might get from the department. And like I said, they are watching. Internal Affairs is watching social media and things like that. And so when I do hear your daughter told me, hey, a lot of my friends listen. That's awesome.
Yeah.
To hear. I hear these things, different parts.
I wish I could get my daughter to listen.
I'm cool with that, So, but I think anybody that really wants to learn, and you and I, it's because we lived that way. We held ourselves that way, and not perfect, but we ended our careers graciously, right? I think in good standing.
Absolutely in good standing.
Right, and it wasn't perfect, but there are some good people out there. I'm not saying us. I'm saying there's a lot of good officers out there, and a lot of good officers have left, your daughter included. They left this department. The department's missing out. These guys, if they do get their jobs back, mentally they're kind of checked out. One of them resigned. The last one, Thomas and Carlos. Carlos is still hoping to get his job back. Thomas resigned. He got his job back.
The supervisor retired early because of what had happened. He just could no longer do the job effectively. And kudos to Jesse Allen for saying that and having the courage to come on the podcast. You should watch that podcast.
Yeah, it's either by design or it's just the fallout from such bullshit that these guys are doing. And again, I don't think it's gotten bad enough. It's going to get bad enough. And, just keep the show. We're going to keep talking about all this stupid shit that they're doing. I mean, there's no other term for that but stupid shit. And again, it's a lot of cowardice on our own city government because they don't know any better. But we have an alleged top law enforcement officer who should guide them on, hey, it's probably not the best idea for the public's safety. Instead, we're playing politics, with this. So that's me on my high horse.
Yeah. So we'll pick this up again. Hopefully you can watch this. We'd appreciate you watching this so that the next one, we'll kind of feed right into what we left off here. Hopefully we'll be able to come back and talk about how the jury here in San Antonio found all 3 of these individuals not guilty because they took action that was reasonable and in line with what they were supposed to be doing on their job. And yeah, thank you for listening as always.
Y'all take care.